And thank you guys for joining us for Monthly Mindset. And people will still keep coming in, I'm sure. But Heather, for those who haven't joined us before on any of these, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Heather Perucchi. I'm a licensed mental health counselor, which is just the fancy Hawaii title for I'm a licensed therapist. I run a company called ChangeWorks. I've been doing that for about 2 of the 7 or so years that I've been in Hawaii. The majority of my work has been around connecting people to the care that they need. So that's everything from folks who are houseless and don't have any connection to any sort of support or care or housing or services in the community, all the way up to working with executive teams and larger corporations on things like communication styles and how to effectively create working relationships and healthy environments in their work communities. So I'm, as always, honored to be here with you guys and open to your questions and your thoughts. And just like grateful, like it's a new year and we have a fresh start, and I don't know, just excited to be here today.
Yeah, and I highly recommend that everyone attend this once a month. I mean, most companies don't have this kind of course or class, I don't know what you want to call it, to help with the self-care portion that you should always be kind of keeping tabs on. So please invite other people. It doesn't have to be within KW, but invite your KW brothers and sisters, invite people outside. I think everyone can benefit from it, but I'll hand it over to Heather, and yeah, you can feel free to share a screen or take it from here.
Awesome. Thanks, Chad. So, normally I would just sort of dive into like what we're going to talk about for the day, but I do feel like with just the way that the world is right now and the week that we've sort of been going through, I do just want to give you guys a minute to sort of honor the incredible amounts of information that are sort of coming at you this week. I mean, rightly, it's been sort of the last couple of years, but in the last month or so, we really have just increased this inundation of information, whether it's positive and hopeful information or it's, tougher negative information. Regardless of your political affiliations or your belief systems, I do think that as human beings, it's been a really, really difficult week to be alive and sort of watching what's happening in our community. And, a lot of times we think that we're sort of not above the need to process these sorts of things, but a lot of times we think they don't impact us until well down the road, when the culmination of the events that have gone in our community they really just hit us, and we find ourselves feeling, much more lethargic, much more unable to sort of manage our day to day, having difficulties with focus and attention, difficulties in our relationships. And, as a therapist, I'm supposed to have all the answers. I'm supposed to, be the one that's got it all put together. And I have to tell you, more than ever, I've had to really take extra time in my day today to sit and to breathe and to focus on what's at hand and to really decrease the amount of things that I've been doing. My calendar this week looks so different than it did a year ago. A year ago, I was working 10, 12-hour days and really being able to crank out work. And lately, I just haven't been able to do that nearly as much as I used to. So I find myself, instead of 10 appointments a day, I have more like 4. And really coming to terms, not just with the decrease in on or active time, but, fighting against this idea that less appointments means less productivity. So I just want to take a quick minute before we start and let you guys take a super kind of deep breath. I've sort of gotten used to starting any sort of trainings like this, but I want you guys to sort of ground your butt into the chair or your feet into your anti-fatigue mat if you're at a standing desk, and just take a super deep breath. And I would really encourage you to try to do that at least once or twice a day, just to sort of clear out the cobwebs, give yourself a minute to just get really present and grounded in whatever it is that you're experiencing today, and allow yourself to sort of just recenter and refocus. A lot of times when we have sort of a year shift, we think, okay, all the crap from the last year is gone. And, truth be told, it really is just a calendar. There's lots of things that it means, and astrologically and planet wise and all that sort of stuff. But, at the end of the day, this does give us an opportunity to sort of like take a minute, take a deep breath, and refocus on whatever the priorities are that we have for this coming year. I know you guys are doing recharge, and I'm excited to be part of that with you guys pretty consistently. So today I thought we would spend a little bit of time sort of reviewing what we've talked about in the last couple mindsets, just to give you a refresher. But I'm going to introduce you guys to something called the Four Agreements. It is a book. I use it a lot because it really encompasses kind of this full picture of things that we can do that are quick and really simple to integrate into our day-to-day. And then we're going to talk a little bit about kind of setting some intentions around that. So I wanted to just give you guys a quick review of the stuff that we've talked about in the past. We sort of started off talking about how wellness is a super actively pursued goal. If you want to pursue and find wellness in your day-to-day, you must set an intention to be able to do that. It's not something that's going to happen by chance. It's not something going to happen just because you opened up an hour of your day. It's not something that's going to happen sort of along your other goals. So wellness really is something that you have to set an intention to do. For me, it's if I don't do it in the morning, it's not going to get done. So I do have to balance my morning priorities with making time for activity. I will tell you, yesterday I skipped it because I thought I was too tired. And then by the end of the day, I was super grumpy and kind of bit my spouse's head off. And now really regret doing that because I could have just taken a walk and it would have probably ended up a lot smoother. But anyway, wellness is an actively pursued goal. So it is a choice that you have to make every single day or every other day to set that discipline. And then we sort of navigated into figuring out our why. Why do we do the things that we do? Why did we pick this profession? Why did we come to this place of wanting to understand the why of what we do rather than just the what of what we do? And then sort of talked a little bit about how people really do buy into the why of what we do. So if, my ultimate goal is to connect people to care in our system, everything comes from that foundation and that why. People are buying into my desire to actively get people to connect to the care that they need, whether that's helping someone find a primary care physician, which is sometimes seems outside my scope, but will help lead them to a more physically well overall lifestyle. Sometimes it's finding an apartment for somebody who can only afford $600 a month. So it just kind of depends on what your why is. We did talk about why if we don't have a why, it's difficult to build our foundation because we're operating from several different platforms. And then we talked a little bit about the idea of a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. When we decide whether we are focused on fixed or growth, it does help us align with our why and then helps make our goals easier to set and our goals easier to obtain. So then when we find our strong foundation of our why and we figure out what is meaningful to us and the reasons that we get up in the morning and we decide to get out of bed and we decide to take that walk or go running or go to the gym or move our body or get sunshine or meditate or journal, once we have that strong foundation, we then worked on developing our how. This was setting our task list. This was figuring out how to arrange our calendar. I just ordered a acrylic wall calendar that I'm super kind of nerdly excited about, so I can list my goals and I can see them every day on the wall so that they continue to inspire me ongoing. That's a little quick review of our mindsets in the past. So we talked about the why, setting our foundation, and then we talked about how we're going to pursue the use of our why in our day-to-day, and then we are left with the what. And what's really interesting to me about talking about the what is that this is such a personal decision. Deciding what to do with our lives, first of all, it's not poured in concrete. So just because you decide to become a social worker at the age of 21 doesn't mean that you can't become a therapist at the age of 28. And so I want to make sure that you guys understand that the what does not have to be something that you decide today and you have to do forever. It's a really flexible, fluid path that can change and pivot. And sometimes there's a fork in the road, and both options that you're going for seem like they might work out well. And so when we talk about the what, I want you guys to really remember that the what comes from you as a human. It comes from the reasons that you get up and you start your day every morning. And it comes from the how of the pieces that you put together in your day to day to help you feel successful. So if you decide that you want to work retail for the first 10 years of your life, and then you want to go back to school at the age of 30, and everybody says, oh my gosh, you're too old to go back to school. Although I'd really argue that 30 is very young to go back to school. You can say, well, my what's changed. I want to do something different now. And so as we start to talk about the what, I want to introduce you guys to the 4 agreements. And I neglected to pull the book off of my shelf, so I'm not going to take the time to try and find it. But the author is Don Miguel Ruiz. He's a very simple writer. The book is actually quite small. You can like tuck it in your pocket almost. So for those of you that have read it, I would encourage you, if you want to, in the chat or the Q&A, to add any sort of thoughts that you guys have around this. But I thought with the way that the world is sort of existing and all of the chaos that's going on in our political spectrum and climate, and all of the suffering and indecision and confusion around COVID and our community, I thought one of the best things that we can do as we're starting to put our plans together for the what is to come back to ourselves and really be faced with the reminders of how we establish a mindfulness practice, which we talked about in the wellness mindset, but also like, how do I make sure I'm the one that's remaining accountable to myself so that I can bring the best version of myself out into the world? So here we go. So the first agreement is be impeccable with your word. This one seems like super self-explanatory, but when you read through the chapter in the book, it's so interesting to me that this one is actually the most challenging for people, because our world is moving at this incredible pace and we have all kinds of things that we're responsible for. And we have lots of people and responsibilities pulling us in all different sort of directions. This one can actually be the most difficult for us to adhere to. I think there's a reason that it's set first. It seems so simple to like really be forthcoming and impeccable with your word, but our words have so much power. So if you think about, for those of you who are parents, if you think about saying to your child, yeah, I can't help you with that right now, but I'll help you with it later. That word that you've given your child has power for them. They believe that because you've said to them, I'm going to help you with it later, that you're actually going to do that. And so when you think about this with a business colleague or an assistant or someone who you report to, if you say, yeah, I'll get to it by Friday, we don't think it's such a big deal sometimes because we're like, oh, they'll be understanding or they'll be flexible. But that person is really perceiving your intention to follow through on that. And we often think that this is just something that we can gloss over, but I really would challenge you to deeply understand that your words to other people become their belief in you. And when you set an intention for someone to show up, that intention becomes their truth. So do what you say. And one of the easiest ways to sort of tackle this particular challenge and help become even more accountable is to take that super deep breath and recognize that your presence will help you make the most impeccable words you can. So the faster you go and the more distracted you are and the more you're running in 17 different directions, the less able you are to really be accountable to what you're saying. So if I have 10 appointments a day, by the 10th appointment, my brain is so mushy that I'm not sure that I'm actually fully present and participating in that appointment. And so I really have learned to be impeccable with my word to myself. So if I say to myself, okay, my goal is no more than 5 appointments in a day, I have to stick to that. Because if I'm not impeccable with my word to myself, it's going to be really difficult for me to be impeccable with my word to other people. And so the flip side of this too is that if you need someone else to be more accountable and impeccable with their word, the most tricky part is to really understand how your approach is influencing their ability to be accountable in their word to you. So if you need somebody else to change their behavior, you have to consider how you're approaching that person in order to help them be their best version of their self. This goes back to the languages of appreciation that we've talked about. in which you have to understand how other people communicate in order to be able to understand how to communicate with them in an effective way. So at the end of the day, the first agreement is to be true to your word, but it's also one of the most difficult because it really does create the foundation of who you are as a human being. So because our words have power, we want to make sure that the words that we're putting out into the world are the most impactful and the most truthful that we can. I don't see any questions, so I'm going to keep going. The second one, and actually this is my most difficult one because often I fail at this, but the second agreement is to not take anything personally. It really, it's interesting too, because your word, if your word becomes your law and it becomes the place of accountability that you're at, it's easier for you to not take things personally because your foundation is the truth that you live by. And so when we talk about not taking things personally, this is a discipline that takes a lot of practice. I am 41 years old. I've been practicing this for 36 or so of those. I'm a recovering people pleaser, but I'm also recovering taking everything personally or everything is about me person. And so, especially as a therapist, I really find that the majority of the things in the world that other people are upset about have nothing to do with me, but they have a lot to do with themselves. And so if I'm impeccable with my word and I'm showing up and I'm offering guidance and support in the way that I feel is best, I really have to lean into the fact that I don't need to take other people's stuff personally. If somebody shows up to session and they're super angry, it's very unlikely that that person is showing up to session angry at me. If they were angry at me, they might cancel. If they were angry at me, they might send me a text and say, I'm angry at you and I don't want to meet with you right now. Hopefully with all the assertive communication support that we've done in sessions, they would feel strong enough to do that. But really, at the end of the day, if you start to understand that people's behavior has very little to do with you and a lot to do with themselves, it becomes easier to communicate with others because we just allow them to have the space that they need in order to process through the information that they're working through. So if your catchphrase is, it's not about me, when we avoid taking things personally, we spend a lot less of our time feeling offended by other people's actions. And so when we take things personally, we're sort of compelled to feel some sort of way about it. And then we feel sort of compelled to like defend ourselves. Like, no, that's not what I meant in my email. You read it the wrong way. I don't need to justify my behavior, things like that, rather than, oh, it seems like we had a miscommunication about the tone of voice in the email. Maybe we should have had a conversation in person. And so when other people's poor attitudes or other people's anger or other people's frustration exists and is coming at you, just let it be. Let it exist. Let them get their frustrations out. Let them be angry and just listen. Listen to the content of the message. So what are they actually angry about? And listen to whether or not they're asking you for help, or they're asking you to just listen, or they're asking you for some sort of support. Because another thing that happens when we make things about us is that we try to offer advice to other people. Well, you need to do this about it. And then it turns into a little bit of a battle of wills, right? Well, that's not what I meant. That's not what I said. Why can't you just listen to me? And so when we allow other people's frustration and anger to become something that we have to solve, we become then tied into that. So if you're impeccable with your word, I'm going to sit here with you while you express your frustration. And then you remove the personal importance out of the conversation and you just allow for that space. You can then allow that anger to just exist as anger. It doesn't have to be something that you need to do something about. So the last kind of sentence on this slide, I always hesitate about leaving it in, because it's hard to explain that we become addicted to the way that we feel when we blame somebody else for something. When we remove all sorts of blame from ourselves and don't take responsibility for what is our responsibility, we really can become addicted to the like, well, it's not my problem. It's not my problem. It's not my problem. And it's tricky to explain the very, very gray fine line between not taking things personally and not taking responsibility. So when we talk about not taking things personally, we're talking about Someone else's stuff is not about me. When we're talking about that compelled feeling to blame somebody else, we're talking about taking responsibility for our own actions. So I want to make sure that there's a separation between those two things so that there isn't confusion about what we're talking about. What we're talking about right now is your anger, your frustration is not about me, and it's not my responsibility to fix it for you. But I will allow you the space to vent about it. So first one, be impeccable with your word. Second, try not to take anything personally. By the way, when this does happen, just have a conversation about it. It ends up being something that you can communicate about pretty effectively. So the third agreement, don't make assumptions. Don't assume that just because somebody is some kind of way that that is fact. The problem with assumptions is that we make an assumption and then we believe that's what the truth is. And then we operate accordingly. So when you take something personally, when you make somebody's anger about you, you then assume that the anger is something that you have to do something about. And then you operate from that perspective, whether that's defending yourself, whether that's becoming offended that they would have the nerve to be angry with you. Oh, it becomes a big, huge mess. So when you are true to your word and when you are avoiding taking things personally, when you start to make an assumption, ask a question if you feel like something's unclear. So if somebody comes at you and they're frustrated and they're yelling all kinds of information at you and you're the boss and you have to help manage that situation, ask a clarifying question about what's happening. Hey, listen, I can see that you're upset. Is this something that you feel like you can talk about right now? Or is this something that just needs to you need to take a minute? Because we need to be able to create the space to not assume that we have to do something about whatever it is that's happening. And when we make assumptions, it really does make the problem even bigger. So if our goal is to recharge and refresh and tackle 2021 with a renewed excitement, let's make one of those excitements. I'm not going to assume anything about anybody. I'm not going to assume that somebody who sent a curt email has a problem with me. I'm going to assume that they're having a rough day. So when you are allowing things to be exactly as they are, it really does avoid those conflicts becoming a bigger issue. So if I don't assume that Chad is angry at me because he didn't text me back in the first 15 minutes when I texted him, it allows for him to A, be busy doing other things, and B, me not be responsible for how long it takes him to text me back when I text him a question. So just maybe let things go a little bit, allow there to be space in between your conflicts or your confusions. And then the second part of assumptions that I think can be the toughest for us to focus on is this idea of should. So if I could eradicate one word, well, there's a few that I would remove from the English language. But if I could take the word should out of everyone's library, I would literally, like Men in Black with the laser thing against the eye, I would remove that word, because should implies shame. It implies that you should have done better. You should have made more time for this. You should have known the answer to this. You should have known that so-and-so was going to have a bad morning with their kids and come into the office all kinds of stressed out 17 ways from Sunday. If you can, and if there's one thing that you get from this entire mindset today, it's flip your should into could. And it'll help you eliminate the use of, I should have worked out this morning. I should not have eaten a bacon cheeseburger with fries for lunch because now I feel like garbage. I shouldn't have, I should have. Eradicate that from your language. I could have worked out this morning, but instead I made the choice to sleep in. I could have worked out this morning, but instead I made the choice to take a really slow walk with my dogs. It'll shift away from the shame language into empowerment language. So everybody got that? No shoulds, only coulds. Awesome. Any questions so far? I don't see anything in the chat. Okay, so the fourth one is the best one. Always do your best. The three that we've talked about seem challenging. And really the whole idea is to give you guys a positive perspective on this idea of starting a new year and having a fresh, clean slate and being able to work through all of the stuff that we're trying to sort of leave behind in 2020. But really at the end of the day, this is where the should versus could comes in. If you always do your best, you will always show up as your best self. So like I mentioned earlier, my best last year was 10 appointments a day, sometimes, not always, don't get me wrong. I'm not Superwoman, but on the days that I would handle 10 appointments. And at the end of the day, I would always be tired, but I would really feel like I'd done the best I could with the day that I had. And so now my best looks like super different. It allows for way more time in quiet, way more time doing administrative stuff, and way more time trying to better understand how I can put the best version of myself out into the world. And so the gauge that we can use is we know that we're doing our best when we feel empowered and we feel compelled and we feel excited and we feel, joyful about the things that we're doing in our day to day. So if I'm sticking true to my word, hey, I don't have the bandwidth for that particular presentation this week, but in 2 weeks, I have lots of time and I would love to share that with your team then. And then I don't make assumptions that they're angry with me, and I don't take it personally when they're like, oh, we can't fit you into this schedule. And then I know at the end of the day that I've done my best in establishing my boundary about what I can handle and can't. I know that I have made a decision that's best for me. And so this really is about our own self-focus. When we talk about wellness and we talk about communicating well, it really does always start with where we are as a human being, not us as an employee, not us as a friend, not us as a spouse, not us as a parent, but us as in partnership with ourselves. So recognize that the previous three, which seem a little bit more difficult to shift, really do build into this final objective. We know that we're doing our best when we feel excited about doing it. We know that this isn't about proving things to other people, but rather engaging in a relationship with ourselves. And I find this a lot actually in agencies where we have a lot of really ambiguous objectives to meet. When we don't set those really, really smart goals and we don't have really specific measures, if you take action because you feel like you have to, and you're sort of working towards this like nebulous goal, you really are going to not only burn out very quickly, but you are going to just eliminate your ability to be able to bring your best self, because you're never going to really know what you're working towards. If you have a 3-month project that has very specific measurable goals for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and those goals within those 30, 60, 90 can actually be measured, like on a piece of paper or in a spreadsheet or in a database, you're going to take action because you know exactly what's expected of you during those 90 days. When you have this like, oh, I want to increase sales, it's tough to be able to measure whether or not you're doing that. What are the extenuating circumstances that go around that? What are the staffing solutions that need to happen around supporting you in your goal, things like that. So if you're going to take action because you absolutely have to, and because you feel like somebody's watching you, it's going to be really tricky to bring your best self and have a deeper understanding of why you do the things that you do, how you do the things that you do, and what you're going to do about it. So to sort of bring it all into like a big circle, we talked about establishing our why and the foundation of why we do things. I do it because I want people to get connected to care. The how is I show up every day. I am a taskless person. I'm clearly very excited about my acrylic calendar on the wall that I'm going to use dry erase markers to set my goals for. And then the what is I'm going to continue doing community-based outreach. So I'm going to, every third day, I'm going to go out for 2 or 3 hours. I'm going to walk and I'm going to find my people and I'm going to connect with them to make sure that they have what they need. So in doing that, I want to be able to complete the circle by remembering that I can do the things that I'm capable of. And so I'm going to show up every Monday morning with the goals for my week. I'm going to slowly implement them in a measurable way. And then I'm going to be true to my commitment to myself. I'm going to be impeccable with the word that I've committed to. I'm going to try not to take it personally when somebody tells me to F off and they're not interested in my help today, which is fine. Everybody's in a different place in a different day. I'm going to not assume that their frustration is about me. And then I'm going to just do my best. So maybe my best is I met with this person told me to F off. They're not interested in any sort of intervention today. And I'm going to go home and I'm going to document that. So, and in all of that, as your final sort of bullseye into the dartboard, I'm going to remember that it's not that I should have done more. It's that I could show up, I did show up, and I followed through with my commitment. So that's sort of the big circle of today, and bringing this idea of sort of inspiration through remembering to manage and control the things that you are in control of, as opposed to trying to control things outside of your ability to manage. So Jody, I'm so glad you just read it, and I'm glad that you recommend it. That's awesome. So thoughts. This is a picture of me and my business partner. She's probably one of my favorite human beings in the entire world. It's a very old photo shoot, so excuse my hairdo. I would love to hear you guys' thoughts. Go ahead, Chad.
My aha is I love these kind of things. I heard this book. I have not read it, so I will absolutely get it and read it. I love things like this that are, it sounds on the surface super simple, and the way you broke it down was unbelievable. I took a bunch of notes, but it's not easy though. Like, it sounds simple, but it's like, man, the thing that you had said that I think for me personally is that second agreement, not to take anything personally. I take everything personally because I'm a people pleaser. I always want to try to make a difference in someone's life. So if something doesn't go the right way, I'm always like, oh, what can I do? I kind of bear that weight, whether it's in a personal relationship or a business setting as well. So that's a tough one. That's like a constant. And this is one of those things where I would imagine that it's almost impossible or very difficult to achieve mastery because it's a constant growth, and you might excel in one agreement and then realize that you're kind of dipping in another or what have you, but it's really interesting stuff.
Yeah, I really am fascinated by concepts that are going to stick with me for life. Like the self-help industry is, just billions of dollars, and you can buy books on thousands and thousands and thousands of topics. But for me, when I read this one, it became so obvious and yet so like complicated. Like I've never really thought that I was a person that wouldn't stay true to my word. But then when I read that particular chapter and I realized how many things I said in an offhand way, like, oh yeah, I'll absolutely follow up, or, oh yeah, I'll send you that referral, or, oh yeah, my naturopath is amazing, I'll happily send you that. And I just don't do it. Those are seemingly unimportant, but they really do build this foundation of like not following through on what you say you're going to do. And I want to be really careful too. This isn't about being superhuman. This is about coming to a place of a realistic understanding of yourself as a human and how you operate. So, like I said, last year at this time, I was like really, really good at lots and lots and lots of appointments. I could work 50 to 60 hours a week and didn't even really feel it. And it wasn't just COVID, but like I'm kind of into the sort of political climate of what's happening in our community right now, both locally and nationally. And so that inundation of information became super heavy for me. And so now I'm carrying around 20 times as much information as I was last year at this time. So we have to be really realistic about not just what we can handle today, but making sure we continuously evaluate our own self-awareness, our own self-ability, our own really like time management and goals, because the idea of being the best you can change every day. It likely won't, but you're really constantly building on these particular foundations over and over and over again.
Anyone else have any ahas or questions?
Yeah, that too, Heather. I'm Kevin. I'm homeschooling 4 kids, and so I have realized that my threshold has gone down. You know, I used to be churning out tons of deals, appointments while pregnant with newborns, because many of my children are back to back. And now, like,
Whoa.
I thought, gosh, babies were needy. No, middle school, preschool, they're needy. So I'm on my headset today so I can still go round robin and try to keep them on task. And of course, one of them's on YouTube instead of his class, but I'm sitting with that. I'm trying to push for my goals and things. And then I'm going, no, I don't have the bandwidth today. This is where I could end up making mistakes, you know, in the past. So let me just let it be done for now, make a note to myself to get back to it tomorrow. But I do love the Four Agreements. It's a fantastic book, and I'm ready for a reread of it this year too.
Yeah,
thank you.
I try to read this. Oh my gosh, you're so welcome. And thank you for your kind words too. And thank you for your kindness to yourself, because first of all, I was a teacher for a year and I will never repeat that because the kids ran me ragged. Like, I have no idea how our teachers like do it in a regular setting. And then I'm watching my friends who are in, you know, executive leadership positions or like really intensive direct service positions where they're out in the community all the time, and they're managing their kids at home, and they're like sticking with their goals that they had 2 years ago or a year ago. I'm like, listen, like, everybody, let's just take a little break here. Like, my task list went from 5 tasks a day to 3 tasks a day. I don't know if you guys have kind of, if you're familiar with that concept where you set your 3 non-negotiable tasks and then your 3 would like to tasks. And then everything that doesn't get done on that list moves to the next day and becomes the have to get it done tasks. Helps people who are super logically minded with like checking things off a box. But my task list used to be 5 or 6 things that were like have to do's. Now it's more like 3, because it really just, it's just a different time, and we need to be a little bit kinder with our own selves. And that goes for like self-help too. Sometimes you just need to like take a brain break and not do anything. Like, don't read something helpful, just like stare at the tree across the street, or drink a mug of tea, or like take a water break, just because your brain needs that to be able to sort of like take a break.
Yes, thank you.
Anyone else have any other questions or ahas or anything? Maybe one more from someone?
I hope to one day be a recovering person that cares about, you know, everything's I'm the center of everybody's, you know, attention. She brought it up at the beginning. Just, I like the way that, I can't remember how you phrased it exactly, Heather, but you said you're basically a recovering one who used to be
people pleaser.
People pleaser.
A recovering people pleaser.
That is now my biggest, well, one of my biggest goals of this year. I'm gonna be a recovered people pleaser. So.
Awesome. I just want to give you some props on setting that goal, because I really do feel like as a recovering people pleaser, it's one of the hardest goals to set, right? Because the goal really is about you. And because you are often focused on other people, it can be really tricky to make the goal about you, because you want it to be about pleasing other people. And it's like this very vicious cycle. Lisa, sure. You are correct. So in my okay, and I want to make sure everybody is very clear on this. Being in recovery from alcohol and or drug addiction is the same as being in recovery from any sort of emotional capacity issue, whether it's people pleasing, letting people walk all over you, over committing, putting too many things on your calendar, all of those things. Recovery is a fluid process. And so, Lisa, you are absolutely correct. Being in recovery from people pleasing really is about learning how to set boundaries. Boundaries are not negative. Boundaries are not really meant to be rude. They're not meant to be insulting. They really are meant to help you create your best version of yourself. And what's interesting about my experience is that the 10 appointments versus the 5 appointments, I'm actually a much better clinician. I can show up and be much more present in my sessions. I feel tired less often. My workouts feel like they take less effort to like get out of bed and get going. And so in my recovery and my ability to now set boundaries, I've been able to find much more enjoyment in the things that I do. So finding that joy is a result of saying my time needs to be important and I want to be able to establish that. So maybe we'll have a mindset on boundaries.
That's awesome. And you could say that, you know, truthfully, if you can stop worrying about other people and pleasing them so much, in the end, that's the best thing for everybody else around you. And it lets you actually take care of everybody that, yeah. Anyway, thank you.
Right. You know, they use moms as the most often example of this, right? When moms start to become a healthier and more capable version of themselves, they tend to show up in a much improved way for their kids and their spouse and their workplace. And remember too, when you allow other people to struggle through stuff on their own, they learn how to do it. And then they become better humans because they've taken that upon themselves. It's why I don't take responsibility for my clients in therapy, making progress or not making progress. I will show up, I will be present. Your time will belong to you, and I will be there for you, and I will listen, and I will create whatever sort of environment you need, but I will not tell you what to do. I won't tell you how to fix it because there's very little power in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I'm
I
full
need
of
to do that more with
suggestions.
my kids.
Thanks, Heather.
Well,
Let them struggle
I mean,
along, but I feel so bad on these Zoom calls with these kids. I'm like, how is a 4-year-old supposed to be on Zoom calls?
so
8 to
remember
11.
how the agreements say don't take anything personally and don't make assumptions? Like, I can't think of anybody in my last year of Zoom experience that has cared if my dogs bark on screen or if my husband has happened to walk behind me. Like, nobody has said one word about it. So my assumption is that I'm, you know, insulting other people, but most of the time people don't particularly care. So that's part of one of those like ahas, like, oh, I don't have to worry about that because I don't think anybody else cares.
I think for us as realtors too, the thing that I've kind of, that helps me is like, let me say, I'll back up. In my prior life, in my other career, I had to make a lot of decisions. The thing I love about real estate is I don't need to make any decisions. I provide options to my clients and my clients make the decisions. So that has really released like a ton of stress, I think, from my life and my, you know, for myself personally, just being in this, you know, and I felt like that release was super huge, you know, in terms of my quality of life. And I'm like, this is like the best job I've ever had in my life, you know, so that's why I'm loving real estate, for just making those kind of little switches.
That's amazing. Congrats. It like brings these like little sparks of joy to my heart when people are like, this is the best time of my life, because it means that you're doing those things like replacing should with could, or showing up for yourself, or taking yourself out on a date. It's all part of it. And yes, that's my number one like personal achievement, is if I show up as myself and only one person in the room finds anything relevant out of what I say, I've done my job because I showed up as myself. So I think authenticity is one of those things that tells and communicates to the world, like, I get it, I'm taking care of myself, and I'm going to show up as me instead of what I think you want me to be. And actually in real estate, that's a good lesson too, because people have these very unrealistic expectations of you, and it isn't your job to meet those. It's your job to help them understand that their expectations might be a little bit unrealistic.
You know, one thing I just want to say one thing, Alan, about what you said, which is interesting, is real estate is far less stressful than your previous life. It's also perspective too, which is fascinating, because there's a lot of people, especially new ages, that are like, oh my God, I'm so stressed out, because they don't, there's not a comparison to maybe what the struggles or situations that you were dealing with. So it is interesting in life how everything is perspective, and how we look at it, how we view it, what we view as stressful or not. And as we are all in real estate are dealing with the exact same thing, you looking at it as less stressful and another agent looking at it as more stressful, only based upon their previous experiences, which is a fascinating thing. I love that. Any other questions or ahas for Heather or for the group?
I have a quick question. So the other day I was cold calling and I came upon 2 in a row of these guys that were homeless and living in tents. And it was sad. I had to end my cold calls after, but I was just curious, if we do come across people who are homeless or need mental care, are you taking people in?
I wish I had a commune to be able to do just that. So I'm gonna condense a very long reaction to that question into a couple of simple statements. I think one, you have to do whatever it is that you're comfortable doing. So if you want to offer suggestions to somebody who says, oh yeah, I'm in a much different situation this year than I was the last time, or why am I on your cold call list? I'm homeless living in Kapiolani Park. You have to really gauge your amount of comfort with having an ongoing conversation with that person. So are you wanting to say can I offer you a suggestion or can I offer you a referral? And your number one place to start is actually either 211, which is the program that Aloha United Way runs. They're basically like the top of the triangle and they farm out what people need. So you just dial 211 on your phone and they'll get you connected to the services that you are asking for, or their health plan. If they're connected to insurance, they can call the customer service line. But if you're not comfortable doing that, I would come up with some sort of catchphrase. I apologize for interrupting your day. Take care, and then you end the call. I don't know what your guys' protocols are for cold calls, so I don't want to step on toes, but if you aren't comfortable having a conversation with someone, try not to fumble through it, because it will come off as inauthentic because you're not quite sure what to do. So to answer the second part of your question, my work with the houseless community is pretty tied to the people who have hired me to do it. So your best suggestion for people is to connect them either to 211 or to their health plan, because that becomes their responsibility to follow that person and get them connected to the care that they need.
Thank you.
Sure. Was that helpful, or did I evade your question?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Chris, did you want to say anything?
I was just gonna say that was helpful too. I wrote down you said it was 211, right?
Yep.
Good information to know, because we always want to be able to be helpful to anybody we come in contact with, if it's comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, there's a plethora of programs that were developed because of COVID, because of sort of the higher, not just the higher rates of people not being able to pay their rent, but the higher rates of people who are trying to find places in which places can't be found because there's all these COVID restrictions in place. So there are a couple container developments happening where people are starting to move in. There's a couple of tent cities, although we don't love tent cities. It does sort of temporarily provide a solution for folks, because there are people who can get services connected for them at those facilities. So that's what Aloha United Way is for.
Awesome. Thanks, Heather.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it, Heather, as always. And one of the things that I would ask, just as I've mentioned before, of all of you guys is, buddy system. Reach out to somebody that's in the market center, even someone that's outside of the market center, and say, just invite them to this class. It's a wonderful thing. It's nothing to do with real estate per se, but it's just about your own self-care. Which I think is extremely important, especially as important during the times that we're all are going through right now. So thank you, Heather. As always, we really appreciate you, and we look forward to seeing you next month.
Thanks.
Yeah, see you guys then.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Hey,
Thank you very much.
I just want to say it's pretty cool that Keller Williams does this for us, by the way. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Very helpful to me personally. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris.
Awesome. Oh, that feedback makes my heart so happy.
Yeah, thank you so much, Heather. Looking forward to next time.
Awesome. See you then.
Aloha.
Thank you very much, Chad, and thank you very much, Heather. It was wonderful.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.